Welcome to the sovereign system, the only place where we don't just analyze the system, we architect a way out. Are you tired of being told you're a component, a mere cog in a machine you don't understand? We reject the idea that your only goal is to survive the chaos. Our purpose is to become sovereign, that is, fully decoupled, resilient, and in command of your own life. Each week, we use a powerful 360-degree framework combining Terence McKenna's novelty theory, occult history, material sciences, and the intentional change model to cut through the noise and reveal the forces shaping your reality. I'm Dave, one of your hosts. While I often dive deep into galaxy brain complex systems, my co host John ensures I stay grounded and focused on practical, real world steps.
That's right, Dave. My job is to be the street level translator. I make sure that everything we discuss, from the massive novelty spikes to the four quadrants of reality, is immediately actionable in your day to day life. We're here to build the bridge between the grand geopolitical chess game and the health of your mind, body, and bank account.
Not only bank account, but also your soul. But let's dive in. This is the sovereign system. Last week, we didn't just talk theory, we gave ourselves a powerful mandate, a piece of deep personal homework to truly visualize your ideal self. Think about it in a post veil, first contact, awakened world with all the old rules crumbling. What does that sovereign ideal self look and feel like to you? For me, that visualization was crystal clear. It meant achieving absolute, unshakable self reliance. It meant becoming a rock for my family. The clarity drove me to action, not just contemplation. I immediately started researching and fundamentally upgrading our home, what I now proudly call Site Alpha. This wasn't just a weekend project, it covered the deep dive into everything from resilience, off grid power generation, to securing long term sustainable, abundant food for my family and myself. It was a commitment to true freedom. But something truly profound happened last week after our first episode dropped. A listener sent me a message that stopped me in my tracks. They asked, Dave, you've defined your ideal self. Now, what do you want for your ideal audience in the next few years? Honestly, I had never had a question framed quite like this before. For years, I focused on the one on one, the individual I was coaching or speaking with. But the venue, the scope, and even the sheer reach of this conversation has absolutely changed. We are building a community, a massive community, if you will. So, John, I think it's time to plant our flag and define some terms again. What's the time frame? Let's aim high. Let's look 3 years out from right now. My hope, my absolute vision is to have catalyzed a movement of over 1 million truly sovereign individuals who have completely woken up, who have extracted themselves from the suffocating systems of oppression that we're all facing today. This is more than just waking up. It's individuals who actively choose to band together, who resonate under a shared, powerful frequency of commonly held values and beliefs, such as but never limited to kindness, honesty, unwavering empathy, profound respect, and most powerfully, showing unconditional love to one another. This is the bedrock of the new world. Why is this so urgent right now? Well, that's easy because we are racing towards this colossal, inevitable novelty moment, this fundamental shift in reality. Things are going to get messy. They're going to get weird. They're going to get really, really bad. They're going to get gloriously, impossibly absurd. As the great Terence McKenna said it best, it's going to get so absurd that we are going to have to talk about how absurd it is just to stay grounded. And only a sovereign, connected community will thrive in this kind of environment. So, that is my unwavering hope and mission for this ideal audience in the next several years. I am committed, soul deep, to take this journey, this incredible climb, with all of you. I pose to you, right here, right now, is simple but defines your future. Are you willing to take that transformative first step with John and me? Let's hand it over to John for a little more on the ground, real world perspective. How are things unfolding for you right now, John?
Hey, Dave, even with the daily pressure we're under, I'm focusing on keeping spirits high. I'm actively using my empathy to connect with people, and the positive energy is infectious. I've seen so many smiles this past week. My goal is to enlighten those around me so they can, in turn, share that light with others. If we keep shining bright, we can absolutely turn the tide. I'm constantly looking for ways to improve myself to be a better influence on everyone around me. 1 million, Dave? Really? 1 million? Forget about it. Let's get to 2. We're shooting for the moon, which, let's be honest, you've already reached. Now let's get back to Dave.
I wanted to introduce a new segment in the show that we're calling the novelty spike. I look back at the previous week for anything we'd consider to be a massive spike. And this past week, that would definitely have to be Trump's post on Truth Social about the UAP or UFO topics. And for the moment, let's treat this post as fact and what that would mean. So basically, he went and said that he wanted to declassify all of the files regarding, say, Immaculate Constellation, which was the Wave Bigoted Special Access Program for the crash retrieval, that the CIA's Office of Global Axis was running in conjunction with the Air Force's Office of Special Investigation and stuff like that. So there's a huge thing going on. UAPs is a huge topic right now. There have been several actual riders in the defense budget bill for declassification. None of it has passed. But I digress. As I said, we're going to treat this as fact. When there's smoke everywhere, there's usually fire. And so we're going to go ahead and be drilling down into the sheer cataclysmic impact of a verifiable UAP disclosure, not a slow drip of breadcrumbs, but a true novelty spike event. For the sake of this thought experiment, let's call it the Trump disclosure. I want to break this down using the 4 quadrants of integral theory, but let's move past the academic terms, John. We need to find the human tremor in the intellectual earthquake.
That's my favorite part. We're not talking about lines on a whiteboard, Dave. We're talking about the deep-seated emotional and structural bedrock of human society. Let's use the analogy of a small village suddenly realizing the entire world is not only watching them, but is about to knock on the door and ask for a cup of sugar.
Perfect. I'll lay the framework, and you bring the story to life. Let's start with the individual interior quadrant, or the upper left. This is about the soul, the core personal myth, consciousness itself. What happens to the human spirit when the we are alone myth doesn't just die, it turns out to have been a cosmic joke?
I call this the astronaut in the attic moment. Imagine Sarah, a brilliant astrophysicist who has dedicated her life to the elegant, lonely mathematics of the cosmos. Yet she's also just a woman who prays sometimes and worries about her mortgage. For 40 years, her core belief, the gospel of her field, was that life in the universe is a mathematical impossibility. We are the statistical anomaly. Then the most powerful person on the planet looks into the camera and says, "We lied. They're here, they've been here, and they're real."
The operating system of the self just doesn't crash, it gets literally wiped.
Exactly. Sarah doesn't just change her 10-year paper on quantum physics. She has to overhaul the deepest wiring of her soul. Her entire subjective experience of reality inverts. She moves from "I am a singular, lonely consciousness fighting a cold void" to "I'm a tiny piece of conscious stardust in a teeming, ancient, cosmic neighborhood." Her fear, her crippling sense of self-importance, her prayer life, it all shifts from terrestrial ego to galactic humility. It's a terrifying, beautiful, personal, existential rupture. She's suddenly a newborn in a universe she thought she knew.
A genuine spiritual crisis of self. Now let's go to the immediate objective flip side, the individual exterior or upper right. This is the material reality, the objective evidence, the literal smoking gun that even the deepest skeptic can't deny.
This is where the nuts and bolts guys, like my old friend Mark, an aircraft mechanic who measures his world in torque and rivets, come in. Mark doesn't care about Sarah's existential poetry. He cares about things that can be touched, measured, and fixed. The official disclosure isn't just a press conference, it's the declassification of metallurgy reports, propulsion schematics, and actual verifiable non-human biological samples. It's the material evidence hitting the desk.
The end of scarcity mentality driven by undeniable advanced technology.
It's like Mark suddenly has to fix a car that runs on consciousness and gravity manipulation, not gasoline. He sees the physical evidence, the smooth, seamless hull of a retrieved craft, the impossible mass reduction drive that breaks the laws of physics he learned in school. It moves from science fiction to the first terrifying chapter in a new mechanical textbook. His reality is changed not by a feeling, but by seeing advanced propulsion and non human biologics written on government form that used to talk about jet fuel. The objective world just got fundamentally material, unrecognizable.
Moving down to the collective, or the collective interior, the lower left. This is the shared culture, the myths, the social contracts, the narrative glue that holds humanity together.
Picture farther Michael, the priest in Sarah and Mark's town. For centuries, his church has been the bedrock of meaning. The narratives he tells, creation, man's unique privileged place in the cosmos, the very nature of divinity, are the cultural software for billions of people. Disclosure hits the software like a catastrophic virus. It's a collective, nervous breakdown.
The foundational myth crumbles and the shared meaning collapses.
Right? If God created man in his own image, but there are five other species with their own prophets, their own sense of the divine buzzing around, what does that mean for the sacred texts? People don't just lose faith, they lose their social map of who they are in a relation to everyone else. Father Michael's sermons have to evolve to integrate the other, not as a demon, but as a peer. The challenge isn't belief, it's integrating a radically new, humbling reality into our religious and social structures. Does the concept of us even survive contact with them?
That's the collective crisis meaning. And finally, the collective exterior, or lower right. This is the global system, politics, militaries, economics, and the ruthless zero-sum game of power.
Dave, this is the big, ugly global game. Think of Anya, the powerful diplomat. Her whole career has been about maneuvering between Washington, Beijing, and Moscow. Suddenly, those three players are just the squabbling residents of a small, wet pebble. When the president says all those secret programs, the presidential codes, the hidden budgets, they're public now. The entire map of global power has to be immediately redrawn.
Geopolitical power resets because the resources are no longer just terrestrial.
Precisely. The power isn't about who has the biggest nukes anymore. It's about who controls the newly disclosed source technology, who manages the new global treaty with the newcomers, and who gets access to the galactic marketplace. Anya's job isn't to negotiate between nations, it's to figure out which planet gets the most favorable trade tariff. Geopolitical power resets because the playing field just got infinite, rendering all previous human power structures, all those alliances and rivalries, as quaint as a playground spat.
So, summing it up, John, a verifiable UAP disclosure isn't just a headline. It's a novelty spike that simultaneously fractures Sarah's soul, or upper left, rewrites Mark's physics books, upper right, shatters Father Michael's social contract, lower left, and throw Anya's diplomatic table into the sun, or lower right. It's not just a change, it's the end of the human era as we understand it.
Exactly. Look, imagine. You've lived in a small house your whole life thinking you're the only person on a giant empty plane. Then one day, the guy in charge, the landlord, knocks on your door and says, actually, this is a massive multi species apartment complex, and the neighbors have been watching you through the vents for years. It matters because you aren't just a guy with a mortgage anymore. You're part of a massive, complex, potentially dangerous system. Your job, your money, your history, even your sense of home just changed forever. And you need to know who's in the next room before they decide to walk in and ask what you're doing with the universal remote.
What a profound statement, John. We're going to continue to revisit the UAP topic throughout our journey together, as the phenomenon is very much an integral part of the dark biome, the spiritual realm, and the esoteric. But now, onto our deep dive on today's topic. We'll look at the trap of the supposedly unprecedented crises that continuously distract humanity, and then we'll look at our first deep dive at mapping consciousness from a material and esoteric perspective. Hey John, have you ever noticed how every single crisis lately is labeled unprecedented? Unprecedented economic downturn, unprecedented supply chain shocks, unprecedented political polarization, even unprecedented climate disaster. Honestly, if I had More news anchors use that word unprecedented. I'm going to start a drinking game, even though I don't drink. The problem is, you'd pass out by noon.
You're not wrong, Dave. And honestly, I think that term, unprecedented, has become the intellectual equivalent of a shrug emoji. It's the default, almost cynical way to frame any major challenge in a way that just begs you to stop thinking. It suggests we're dealing with something completely novel, when in fact, we're likely just watching the same bad movie play out with slightly better special effects like the Fast and Furious franchise of Global Crisis.
Exactly. While the surface level details might be jarring, the specific stock price, the exact cargo ship stuck in the canal, bless that poor Suez vessel, the new TikTok dance craze used for political communication, we're going to argue that all of these crises follow an incredibly predictable, cyclical, and deeply familiar patterns. The novelty or novel territory narrative isn't a brilliant observation. It's often a strategic mask to manage public panic and justify policies faster than you can say emergency powers.
Think of it like this: if the system can convince you the problem is brand new, they can quietly dust off that old musty playbook and consolidate power and implement policies under the guise of necessary emergency driven innovation. We can argue against emergency measures for an unprecedented event. The framing immediately shuts down historical comparison, which is precisely why the audience should care. If you believe a problem is brand new, you deny yourself the wisdom of past solutions. That's like throwing away the map when you're driving into a foggy town.
Our goal is to hand you the map. Stop seeing the jagged edges of a single event, the breaking news headline that screams, "Oh my god, the sky is falling," and start recognizing the reoccurring geometric patterns of history and human behavior. The crisis itself isn't unprecedented. The narrative of unprecedented crisis is often a mask for cyclical historical patterns that power structures utilize to consolidate control. We can break this down using the four quadrants analysis.
Quadrant 1, individual internal, which we call the crisis of imagination. This is the constant psychological state of novelty that traps people in the perpetual fear and a reactive mindset. This is why you care about this framework. It's the shift from the emotional reaction to informed action. You can't learn from history if you're convinced the first person to ever have to deal with a delayed flight or national debt.
Quadrant 2, or the individual external or strategic adaptation. This is where power players use the chaos of crisis to implement emergency innovations, like mass surveillance, specific financial controls, or the restructuring of key industries, that quietly become permanent fixtures of the system long after the crisis is over. Understanding this quadrant lets you spot the difference between a temporary band aid and a permanent power grab, like knowing when a pop up store is actually a lease to own.
Quadrant 3, collective internal, focusing on societal cycles. When you apply frameworks like Ray Dalio's Big Cycle, or you look at the generational work of Strauss and Howe, you stop seeing random events and start identifying predictable, rhythmic patterns of systemic rise, internal conflict, and collapse. It's a rhythmic, repeating pulse in the social fabric, not a random shock. Knowing this gives you a macro roadmap for the next 10 to 20 years. Think of it as knowing when the national mood is likely to swing from "let's all hold hands" to "everyone fend for yourselves."
And finally, quadrant 4, the collective external or economic rhythm. Crises are not anomalies. They are predictable reoccurrences documented as far back as before the 1840s. The next crash is not if, but when, and in what form. This helps you separate the media driven panic from genuine, historically verifiable risk. It's the difference between investing based on a frantic tweet and investing based on a century of documented cycles.
So, why should you care about all of this? Because recognizing these transitions, moving from a place of fear fed by unprecedented headlines to a place of knowledge informed by historical cycles, allows you to move from a reactive defense to a proactive positioning within the shifting international power configurations. It is the difference between being a pawn moved by the panic narrative and being a player who understands the board and maybe even how to checkmate the next unprecedented challenge.
In essence, do these headlines serve to trap you in a state of unprecedented alarm, leading to a systemic lock in and dependence on the established system?
Absolutely. The main issue is what I call systemic lock in. It's the reality that we're all stuck in a way of living, a system that was designed to keep us from ever questioning the way things are, and these headlines keep us in that system. For me, the most painful personal example of this lock in is the United States healthcare system. I have a loved one who suffered profoundly because of it. We've constantly told we have the greatest healthcare in the world, but if I'm being honest, if you don't have the money here in the States, you don't get any of the so called benefits.
So, just to make that simple for everyone listening, right? You're saying we're stuck in this system, this rut, and we're not even allowed to think about changing it. And your big example is the American healthcare system is a perfect illustration of this lock in, where it only works if you're wealthy.
Dave, I looked it up. We averaged 30th on the lists for the top 10 healthcare systems in the world. 29 other countries are doing it better than us. That should really make you think. The truth is, we've been educated to simply believe what we're told. This whole system has built a cage around our thought process, preventing us from even wanting a better system. My current life is filled with my own personal examples of being locked in, botched surgeries, misdiagnoses, and medical malpractice. And all of this is happening in Massachusetts and in three different institutions. This whole experience, Dave, woke me up. I've realized that we cannot be stuck in this systemic lock in any longer, and that private healthcare is not for all of us. Like, it just doesn't work, Dave. This is my experience with systemic lock in. My mom has been going from hospital to hospital, and they continue to get it wrong. They ignore her frantic kind of yelling and, wanting to feel better, and they still can't figure it out. They move her from one hospital to another just to get her out of that bed of that single hospital so then they can put somebody else in. And then they tell me that this works. This is how you fix people. That's not right. That's not right at all. The government keeps saying it can't afford free healthcare, but again, that's just the same old way of thinking. The refusal to break the chain and build something better. Here's an analogy. Imagine a line of burning matches, each one lighting the next on fire. The only way to stop the chain reaction is for one of the matches to decide to step out of the way. That's what I decided to do here. That's how we fix our broken system, Dave.
Wow. So the facts speak for themselves. We're way down on the list compared to other countries. And you're saying that the idea that we can't afford a better system is just a part of this cage, this lock in that keeps us from even trying to fix it. And that match analogy, stepping out of line, so to speak, that's what you mean by breaking the chain and finally building something new?
That's exactly right, Dave. These unprecedented headlines, much like the complexities of the American healthcare system, often function as a form of system lock in. The goal, whether intentional or not, is often to foster reliance on the existing structure, subtly discouraging people from challenging the status quo or exploring alternative solutions. As an informed public, we must resist simply accepting things as they are. We have a shared responsibility as a sovereign people to critically assess the information we receive. Later in the episode, we'll look at some practical ways we can navigate and break free from this systemic inertia. But for now, let's transition to our final fascinating topic, Dave's work on mapping consciousness.
Yeah, awesome. That was very profound, John, and we'll definitely continue to talk about systemic lock-in with various different systems kind of moving forward. But now let's move on to something I hold near and dear to my heart, which is consciousness itself. I've studied consciousness for quite a bit. I love all things and all aspects, and there will be other parts that we will touch on regarding consciousness. This is just the first of many subjects we'll look at. So let's move on to the deep dive of this episode. So mapping consciousness, the material versus the esoteric. So let's zoom in on what all this complexity means for you, the individual listener. We're at a point in history where the very definition of self, your consciousness, your memory, your internal world, is being put up for a technological vote. And there are two fundamentally opposed visions fighting for the future of your mind. We're calling this the Great Tension.
It's the ultimate intellectual boxing match, the cold hard materialist effort to engineer consciousness versus the ancient spiritual effort to access inherent knowledge. One says the brain is a machine to be hacked, the other says it's a portal to be opened.
Exactly. Let's look at the material thesis first. We're talking about companies like Neuralink. This is a profoundly materialistic ambition, the effort to digitize, augment, and ultimately control the physical brain and its output. They're telling you your memory is valuable, your communication is slow. Let's fix it with a chip.
The promise is seductive. Perfect memory, direct thought interface, maybe even telepathic communication. But the risk is existential. If your thoughts can be recorded, edited, or even remotely controlled, where does your free will go? The material thesis states that the real self is a purely chemical and electrical machine, capable of engineering and thus of ownership and surveillance.
So you're saying it's scary because somebody could essentially hack your brain and mess with your memories or even control what you do, right? Like a remote control for your thoughts?
Exactly. And the whole process of getting to human trials is also deeply troubling. Most of these initial tests have been privatized, meaning we have no idea the extent of the harm done to the test subjects, or whether Neuralink actually achieved what they claimed they wanted to do.
Wait, so they're experimenting on people, but it's all secret? And we don't even know if it works or if anyone got hurt? That's really shady. They're keeping us in the dark about something that could fundamentally change us forever.
Precisely. By going down this path with no public information about what this technology has accomplished, we lose sight of the most important question. How does this actually help the individual? Sure, the physical health implications are promising, like the potential to help paralyzed people walk again.
Okay, so on one hand, it could fix serious physical problems, which is great. It's amazing. I would love that for our species. But you're asking if the risk to our mental freedom is worth the physical benefit?
We haven't even begun to scratch the surface, Dave, and we aren't asking the fundamental questions of if we even should be doing this. The people in charge are racing ahead, completely disregarding any moral compass. This technology has the capability to literally rewrite who a person is.
You think this technology is powerful enough to change a person's personality or beliefs? Like fundamentally change who we are as a person? And the people developing it aren't stopping to think about whether that's ethical or not?
Dave, the amount of control this will give to the individuals who manage the Neuralink system will be unspeakable. We have to ask ourselves, are we willing to lose our sense of self, our very identity to the system, just for the promise of unlimited memory and the ability to edit our own brain chemistry?
It sounds like you're asking if the price of being perfectly connected and never forgetting anything is giving up who we are and letting someone else hold the key to our minds. That's a massive trade off. Now, let's pivot sharply to the esoteric thesis, the Akashic records. This is the potent counterpart, an ancient concept that suggests a non material, energetic, or informational library of all universal events, thoughts, and knowledge that exists outside the physical body and brain. What's crazy is this is almost like the Great Library of Alexandria, except it's on the spiritual plane, a place you can only access through altered states of reality, as well as out of body experiences. Or if you're very spiritual, it's also known as astral projection.
This thesis flips the script. It says all information and consciousness are already recorded and universally accessible through non physical means meditation, altered states, and deep intuition. The real self is non local consciousness that must be accessed rather than engineered. You don't need a Wi Fi implant, you just need to find the internal channel.
So here's the rundown for you, the person trying to navigate this crazy world. The collision of these two worldviews, the aggressive materialistic effort to engineer consciousness, Neuralink, versus the ancient internal effort to access inherent knowledge, or the Ashek records, tells us everything we need to know about the future of human sovereignty.
The core tension is between data ownership via technology and information access via transcendence. Do you allow your consciousness to become a product to be engineered, managed by a corporation, and stored in the cloud? Or do you see your consciousness as a portal to be open, connected to a universal library that no corporation or state can censor?
Your choice on this great tension point is what determines whether you'll be a pawn in the next unprecedented crisis or a player who understands the deep Cyclical patterns of power and reality. It's the difference between having an external master key to your mind or an internal one. Now let's look at our four quadrants analysis. Let's start with the upper right, or the individual and external domain.
Okay, so is this about the technology we put into ourselves, right? Like the brain chip?
Exactly. The thesis here is the engineered brain, focusing on the material side of things. Our key concern is the brain-computer interface, ethics, and neurodata ownership.
That's the scary part. If I have a chip, are my memories and thoughts just digital files that someone could hack or even own?
Precisely. The impact is the physical storing of memory and the potential for external thought hacking. Now let's flip to the upper left, the individual and internal. The thesis is information downloads, the esoteric approach. This involves morphic resonance and remote viewing protocols.
So, instead of a chip, this is like my brain just tuning into a universal Wi Fi signal, accessing knowledge from outside but through my own mind?
John, that's a great analogy. The impact is accessing non-local knowledge through purely internal means. Now, moving to the collective, the lower left, or collective and internal, addresses the shared mythos or noosphere.
This sounds like humanity having a shared dream or a group mind.
Absolutely. In essence, yes, it's the cultural encounter with non-local knowledge. The impact is a fundamental shift from materialist ego to a collective consciousness. Finally, the lower right, collective and external. The thesis is the digital infrastructure. We're looking at a totalitarian surveillance versus a universal connectivity.
Man, that's the big fight over the internet. Is it a tool for freedom or a cage?
Exactly. The impact covers the systems managing global data and power. Who controls the network controls the world.
Which quadrant do you think is the most immediate threat right now? Is it the engineered brain or the digital infrastructure? They both seem like the physical points of attack.
I think the lower right quadrant, digital infrastructure, is the most immediate because it's already fully operational and shapes our daily lives. Surveillance, global connectivity, the financial rails, but the upper right quadrant, the engineered brain, is the most fundamental long-term threat to sovereignty. If they can hack a thought, everything is lost.
That makes sense. Digital infrastructure is the cage being built now. The engineered brain is the lock on your personal mind. So if we look at the counter moves, the internal quadrants, what's the best focus for an individual? Should I be trying to be the information downloads, upper left, or contributing the shared mythos, lower left?
You know, the internal power starts with the upper left quadrant, information downloads. That's the part about finding your internal master key. It's your personal practice, meditation, remote viewing, whatever opens you up to non-local knowledge. Once you solidify that personal shift, you automatically contribute to the lower left quadrant or the shared mythos. Your individual shift ripples out and changes the collective story of what reality actually is. The two are inseparably linked, but the individual work has to come first.
So the strategy is defend the outside, cultivate the inside, protect the engineered brain, upper right, and fight the digital infrastructure, lower right, while simultaneously opening up the information downloads, upper left, to feed the new shared mythos, lower left. It's not one front, it's a four-front war.
Exactly, John. The takeaway is this. To be a player, not a pawn, you must be active in all four quadrants. If you ignore any one quadrant, you're giving up a piece of your destiny. John, we've taken our audience on a journey this episode. We started with the sheer glorious terror of a novelty spike, a potential UAP disclosure that shatters objective reality or Marx physics books, the inner world or Sarah's soul. When we dove into the mechanics of power, revealing how every so-called unprecedented crisis is in fact a predictable cyclical tool used to enforce a systemic lock-in. And finally, we confronted the great tension, the fight for your mind between the material thesis of the engineered brain and the esoteric thesis of the Akashic records. So for the listener sitting in their car on their morning commute, what's the single cohesive story here? How do all these terrifying massive pieces, from aliens to algorithms, actually connect to their mortgage and their daily peace of mind?
The connection is elegant, Dave, and terrifyingly simple. The system is trying to outsource your sovereignty. Think of it like this. If you are locked in the crises and you are convinced that only the experts can fix the unprecedented problems, you willingly hand over the keys to your life, your money, your data, your health, to the people building the system. This creates the perfect environment for the engineered brain to be sold as the final ultimate solution to your human fragility. The collective narrative says you are too fragile and too slow for this complex cosmic reality. Let us chip you. Let us control your infrastructure, and we will protect you from the UAPs, the economic cycles, and even yourself.
Exactly, John. It's kind of crazy. They want to take away your sovereignty. Everything about this system is meant to say, hey, you're not responsible enough to be alive. We have to control everything about you. Uh, and again, that's the perfect rundown. The crises soften you up, the cycles lock you down, and the technology offers the final comfortable cage. It's a systemic push towards making the real self an engineered product, not a sovereign portal. Now let's turn the tables. How do we prevent this? We didn't just spend an hour mapping the battlefield just to surrender, right? We did it to equip our community, John. What is the sovereign action plan that cuts across all four quadrants and protects the listener?
It's about deploying the systemic audit we discussed, but applying it as a shield and a spear. It's a 3-step movement: see the pattern, secure the foundation, open the portal.
Absolutely, John. Let's start with step one, see the pattern or the shield. This is the antidote to the unprecedented lie. The crisis is never the problem. The surprise is the problem. Stop relying on media-driven panic for your worldview. It's crazy when we're training, right? Especially when we're on the mats, MMA, stuff like that. We always tell people that, the training cuts down on the fear and the response time. It doesn't eliminate it. Right? And that's what we're doing here is we're removing the surprise so we can actually have an actionable plan to move forward and stop this from happening.
Exactly, Dave. If you recognize a crisis as a rhythmic event, another housing bubble, another war for resources, another political upheaval, you stop reacting like a victim. You start managing like a historian. You don't panic sell your assets. You execute the plan you prepared months ago. Action. Use a simple journal or spreadsheet to track the 3 most persuasive, unprecedented crises you see in the news this week. Next to each one, write down the most historically similar event from the last 100 years. This breaks the spell of novelty.
Yeah, no, again, absolutely right, John. If once we realize that everything kind of moves in cycles, like the big next economic crisis that's on the horizon, which everyone's seeing right now, it's here, it's happening. You realize that you hunker down, you bug in opposed to bug out, and you plan for this, and you're no longer a victim of circumstances. You are taking action in your own preparedness, and you're able to defend yourself, right? So that's leading us to our next step. Step number 2, which is securing the foundation or our defense. This is about defending the objective, external parts of your life or the upper right and lower right quadrants. This goes back to the freedom of switching index from our audit. You must make yourself systematically expensive to control. What does this mean? Freedom of switching index. This is a basic concept that basically states that you should always have backup, secondaries, and tertiary systems that you can go to if there's too much friction in the first one.
The system thrives on your inertia, Dave. If you can't switch banks, if you can't leave your city, if you can't turn off your phone, you're in a high friction lock in. The sovereign win is reducing that friction. Action. Take 2 of your most essential systems, your money and your communication, and apply the freedom of switching index. Find one service for each: a credit union, a decentralized messaging app that you can migrate to in under 48 hours. Do not move yet, just have the escape route mapped and funded. This makes you tactically resilient.
Absolutely, John. And that's what's so important is that a lot of people get locked into the systems because they don't have alternatives. They don't even think that far ahead. They're happy, they're complacent, they're comfortable, and that's where things get dangerous. So we'll look at our next step, which is open the portal or the spear. This is the ultimate non-material defense. It cultivates the inner life or the upper left and lower left quadrants against the engineered brain. If they want to engineer your consciousness, you must prove its non-local, unengineerable nature. You must master your own information download.
Your brain is not just a hard drive waiting for a chip. It is a transceiver for universal information. The greatest threat to the material thesis isn't a protest, it's a realized self-sovereign mind. Action. Dedicate 15 minutes a day to a non-digital, non-productive practice. This could be silent meditation, a walk with no phone, or journaling your dreams. The goal is to access information that did not come from the internet, the news, or another person. This is how you open your internal portal and generate the new, authentic, shared mythos.
Yep. Great advice, John. Really, really good stuff here. So here's the final truth, a combination of this entire episode. The world is complex, but the path to sovereignty is simple. Refuse to be locked in and refuse to be engineered. Be the historian who sees the pattern. Be the tactician who maps the escape. And most importantly, be the awakened sovereign who knows their consciousness is a portal to be opened and explored, not a product to be owned. Take those 3 steps, and you stop being a pawn in the next unprecedented crisis, and you become a player who changes the game. So finally, let's get on to our sovereign win this week with our real self-audit using the internal change model.
And that, my friends, elegantly brings us to our second cornerstone of personal recovery, which we have dubbed the sovereign win. This isn't just a feel good moment, it is the practical, tactical antidote to the systemic gloom of the deep dive. You see, it is insufficient to merely know you are tangled in a complex system. The real life altering challenge is to deliberately locate and grasp the escape key.
Yep. Ah, the escape key. For a brief blissful moment, I truly thought it was a Control-Alt-Delete on my 30-year mortgage. Turns out that just dials your bank's fraud department and precipitates an extremely awkward conversation. No, the actual key, the one we were offering today, is something far more profound, the systemic audit.
Dave, with a name like that, it sounds suspiciously bureaucratic. And I imagine a stack of faded forms and a clerk whose soul left his body around 1987.
It sounds like a government form, John, but it is, in glorious fact, its existential opposite. And it is an act of radical, joyful self-discovery. We are not here to meticulously track how much you owe the system. The ledger is long and depressing enough. We are here today to tally up what the system fundamentally owes you in terms of your undivided attention, your freedom of choice, and that pure, glorious, uninhibited freedom to be your authentic self.
I appreciate that profound reframe. It transforms the entire exercise, so instead of being perpetually focusing on the painful lock in or our current situation, we're strategically pivoting to the chart, the lock through, the path out.
Precisely. We are not conducting a misery index or drafting a ledger of regret. That is yesterday's news. We are, with deliberate purpose and high enthusiasm, building a sovereignty roadmap. We are declaring ourselves the Indiana Jones of our own incredible, complex, overscheduled lives, charting the least tread paths to personal fulfillment and genuine joy. And the secret sauce, John, I'll reframe the internal monologue to be less weary and accusatory. Where did I go wrong? And a far more chipper, forward-thinking, where can I most immediately and powerfully go right? Here is where the rubber meets the road, people. I want you to grab a notebook, open a fresh, pristine document, or if you're gloriously old school like me, procure a giant whiteboard so your spouse instinctively believes you're plotting a bank heist. This is your manifesto. Point 1, the attention economy detox. Let's discard the old scarcity mindset. Instead, let's focus on its powerful, expansive idea. Where specifically am I currently investing my finite and precious attention to gain the highest genuine return in connection, insight, and joy? What strategic, tangible steps can I take to decisively double down on those superior platforms or sources this week? We are looking for abundance, not just an escape.
Dave, that's a brilliant, inspiring shift. It fundamentally changes the dynamic. It's about aggressively optimizing the good in our lives and not merely performing the exhausting task of deleting the bad.
Exactly, John. It's the profound, simple realization that if you spend a solid hour on a platform that genuinely makes you feel smarter, happier, and connected, and you spend another hour on a platform that compels you to throw your expensive phone into a nearby body of water, the solution is not the aesthetic misery of spending 0 hours on both. The solution, the sovereign win, if you will, is to spend 2 full glorious hours on the smarter, better one, or 5 minutes less on the lake phone throwing one. We start with baby steps, but we must start. Point 2, the freedom of switching index. We did cover this briefly before, but we are done with the fear of being locked in. Let us embrace empowerment. We must now identify which essential daily services, be they banking, digital communication, or daily transportation, have I deliberately and proactively chosen because they offer me maximum flexibility, negligible switching costs, and truly align with my deepest personal values. And most importantly, what is my documented next best alternative if I decide tomorrow to strategically upgrade my freedom?
This is where the audit truly becomes a strategic, proactive asset review. You're no longer documenting your liabilities, you are identifying and cataloging your strengths and vulnerabilities against the systemic inertia. It's a defense strategy, but one that leads to offense.
That's the spirit. Look, if your current banking institution requires you to locate a remote village and sacrifice a small goat to the autumn equinox just to change your mailing address, you have successfully identified a critically high friction to freedom ratio. But conversely, maybe your current phone plan lets you walk away with zero penalty and a fond farewell. That, my friends, is a sovereign service. Pat yourself heartily on the back, and then, this is the key, go immediately find the phone service equivalent to your banking. Use your wins as your roadmap. Now, we're going to continue with point 3, the incentives inventory. Let's tear up the old contract where we felt compelled by external systems. We now want to focus on what deeply fulfilling habit, choice, or pursuit, from the method of my daily commute to the specific components of my diet, would I generally pursue if a systemic incentive or disincentive were miraculously removed? And what is the smallest, most immediate, most tactical action I can take to buy that specific freedom back this month?
Dave, that is profoundly powerful. You are effectively forcing the listener to assign a tangible price tag to their true, authentic desire. You're monetizing happiness.
I am. Think of the story it tells. If you know deep down that biking to work would make you 10 times happier, yet you chose to drive solely because the company gives you a $50 gas card, fantastic. Now you have a precise valuation. Your happiness, your well-being is currently being valued at $50. Is it worth 51? The answer, I believe, is almost certainly yes. The overreaching goal of this entire audit isn't the immediate spectacular escape. The goal is a radical, undeniable awareness. It is seeing the strings on the puppet master's hand so you can, with sober intent, start cutting the ones that look the least useful to your sovereign life.
Making the invisible chains visible, as our outline beautifully states, it's a noble and essential task.
Yes, and once you've accomplished that, John, we can move on to the truly fun, truly inspiring part, making those visible chains one by one decisively and permanently disappear. I also want to invite our listeners to invite people from their personal lives, family, friends, peers, and others into this process, not to criticize, but to collaborate. We're not looking for a critique of our mistakes, we're seeking external validation of our potential. Here are 3 positively framed questions our listeners can use to gain powerful, constructive insights for their own personal real self audit as well, leveraging the internal change model's focus on positive self image. The real self audit external insights. So we'll look at the first one, the competence insight. You can say, when have you seen me operating at my absolute best? When have I been the most energized, competent, and aligned with my truest values? What was I doing, and what skills did I display in that moment? This helps validate your upper right strengths, the objective, visible skills and actions that others can admire. The second one will be the purpose insight. What is the unique contribution or quality that I bring to you as a group or to our relationship that you rely on? And what mission or belief do you see me pursuing, even if I don't talk about it? This illuminates your lower left impact, the shared meaning and cultural role you play in the collective. The potential insight. If I were to completely break free from all the limiting belief systems that trap you and know I struggle with, what is the single biggest, boldest thing you can imagine me accomplishing in the next year? This focuses on the upper left, the future self, and the unengineered potential and aspirational vision of your sovereign being. By asking these questions, you turn the audit from a lonely self-critique into a collaborative, inspiring exercise in radical self-awareness and positive reinforcement. You are collecting data points on your future sovereign self.
That's a brilliant way to frame it, Dave. You're essentially outsourcing the search for the ideal self to the people who love you and see your true potential, unclouded by your own internal narrative. It transforms accountability into advocacy. Embrace constructive feedback as a natural part of growth. Reflect daily. How do I improve myself and others today? If the answer isn't clear, use the awareness to build a better tomorrow. Self-improvement begins with accepting criticism. Thank you for listening. Until next time, own your time, own your thoughts, and stay sovereign.